look, I mean, I could be wrong here, but looking at military bands, sure they would have played classics, but I would imagine, as you've said, that the jazz, it probably was something that was sort of experimented with and touched upon within those groups.
Well, yeah, there was a subdivision of the marching band. There was what's called the concert band, and they played very much more dance tunes, which were jazz tunes. So we played a lot of Glenn Miller, and stuff like that, and a sort of entertainment, big band stuff, and that was great. I had been going through the punk thing at the same time as this, and I'd been working with the Sex Pistols, well, Steve Jones and Paul Cook, formerly of the Sex Pistols, and Sham 69, and various others. So my parents were very unhappy with me having anything to do with rock music. In fact, there were only a few limited vinyl records in the house that weren't classical. There were probably about a dozen pop music records. I was allowed the rationing of watching the Monkees on a Saturday evening in or around Doctor Who. And I think that some of the records were like Smokey Robinson's Tears of a Clown, a couple of Beatles records, High Hopes by Frank Sinatra, and a few things like that.
Sure.
And Downtown by Petula Clark, that was it, which was a great record. But I remember really when traveling, I collected radios, and I used to take radios apart and rebuild them. And I used to listen to a lot of shortwave and longwave European stations, and I was always listening to French jazz or flamenco.
Was that almost like on ham radio type things?
Well, they might. I think there were state-run stations,
okay,
but there was always a plethora of really unusual French jazz,
sure,
really obscure musicians that just were totally off mainstream. And I found that the European stations were so much more experimental and explorative for independent artists. So I was absolutely overwhelmed by French jazz and flamenco, Spanish flamenco. I loved it. It meant so much to me.
I suppose that maybe those stations as well. I suppose you could say maybe that was the start of this real sort of fusion of genres in some ways, or maybe fusing styles from perhaps obviously classical players kind of coming together and making sort of something completely new. Which I mean it's just astounding, isn't it? Now all of us have got YouTube or Spotify or something like that. You've got access to like everything, and there's you kind of trying to get like a medium to long wave channel or your kind of weekly dose of sort of from the television kind of thing. I can imagine in a way it's quite compounding in the way that I want to get this music, I want to hear more of this kind of thing, and it starts to form you. I suppose it starts to you almost carve a bit of a musical personality, I suppose, from that.
I think without a doubt, if you sip from many streams, it's gonna get into your blood somehow, without a doubt. And it was a great privilege, I suppose. What I don't realise now, and only just in thinking about it as you're asking these questions, is that it's amazing that we as human beings have had so much exposure to so many different sources of music, and yet before the big broadcasters have taken it all into their pre-chosen collective, which is actually very narrow.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Which I think really is, I mean, I was in the heavy metal kind of genre growing up, and then I kind of got fed up with the narrow-mindedness of it, and I think me coming to film was a way of me kind of getting away from that, and hey, I can do what the hell I want, because who knows what the film's going to want. And I think for me with Skyquaker, all these things you're kind of saying, they're pointing me towards Skyquaker. If we look at those kind of those dots in your life, if you like, of picking up bits and bobs of different music and different fusion, and then Skyquaker kind of being almost a fusion act. I think I find that quite interesting to see. Skyquaker's almost like the culmination of your musical experience in many ways, where you're bringing in lots of different things and constantly trying to kind of merge as much as you possibly can within a collective.
Yeah, I guess you're right, Michael. I think, how can I put it? Skyquaker was actually stimulated by some reading I did on the Chinese music market. Just to cap it quickly, is in China, music from the outside world has only really been available to the Chinese audiences for, say, about 10 or 20 years maximum. And in that time, they've had all of the copious different genres of music, popular music, whatever, however many strands you want to describe, they've had it in a very short space of time, whereas we've had popular music in over 50, 60, 70 years. And so in the West, or the rest of the world, if you like, we've formulated our trend genre attachments. I wear these clothes because I like listening to goth type music, etc., and so on and so forth. In China, they don't have that. It's like they'll be line dancing at lunchtime, and then attending a punk gig at night, and then going to see ABBA, an ABBA sort of sounding type group, or a girly pop group the next day. And I think that to me proposed a much broader and more captive audience that wants to just listen to anything.
I suppose it's interesting you say that because maybe like you say in the West, where it was almost like different groups were emerging at different times and there were kind of movements which fed and influenced another movement. I suppose taking what we've said about maybe the modern way of consuming music, I suppose from a Chinese perspective, they've just been given it all. So they haven't maybe gone through, I suppose, those cultural changes in terms of music. And obviously society is very different out there, as we know. But I wonder whether that is a part of it that you know, because the West is almost kind of opening up in terms of music, and it's becoming like a mainstream kind of thing to kind of let's go and listen to what I suppose what they could call world music, really. But they haven't gone through all the bollocks, I suppose you could say, all the kind of, well, I'm not talking to you because you're a metalhead, and I'm not talking to you because you're a punk, and you know, do you know what I mean? It's kind of like all those kind of group identities that we went through in the West.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. They don't have. I don't think they've got that clutter. I should point out that up until a while ago, and it may still be the case, that if you were a punk, you could be arrested. It was a serious offence. Punk clubs or punk gigs were very much antisocial and against the law. Whether that's changed or not, I don't know. But yeah. It's the forbidden fruit, isn't it? I guess.
I guess it depends what their lyrical content is, but yeah, we won't get into that.